Not even comparing him to those numbers this year, because they're not terrible. I'm not saying that. They're just not Juan Soto-like numbers. So how much of this, right off the top, Evan, how much of this is less about his performance and just more about expectations to you?
It's time for Sportsnaut's MLB podcast. Big League Buzz, news and interviews from around the majors. Here's your host, Scott Gulbransen.
Welcome back, you baseball fanatics. It is time for another edition of the Big League Buzz. That's right, the MLB podcast from Sportsnaut.com. We're here to talk baseball. If you're not here to talk baseball, get the hell out. No, I'm just kidding. Welcome in. We appreciate you guys being here. Scott Gulbransen with you, along with my co-host, my colleague here at Sportsnaut, who you know primarily from his work on the Sportsnaut interview podcast. Yes, we're cross-pollinating here. He does a lot of baseball over there too. That's Mr. Evan Groat. We're here to talk to you today about one topic in particular, and that is Mr. Juan Soto of the New York Mets. How many Mets fans are out there? You poor, poor bastards. I mean, what are you going to say? But we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about that. And Evan is here to do it. How you doing, my man? You hanging in there? You're getting close like me. You have kids, so the end of school is upon us, which is good and bad, right?
Oh, it's good for me. I'm a teacher, so it's real good. I'll be stuck home with my kids all summer, but you know what? It's better than being at work. So I'm excited. Yeah, I'm out here in Buffalo, New York. So we have about 4 weeks left of the school year, and I am really looking forward to being off for about 10 weeks. So yes, getting near the end for sure.
That's because of all that snow you get. You guys end school so much later in fact, I have a friend who used to live in the Poconos, right?
Yep.
And they went to school, I think, until like almost 4th of July.
Oof.
Because of all the time you missed during the winter. It's just they start later, they end later, the whole thing, or they start earlier, end later, and they have some longer breaks or something. It was something like that. But, especially with baseball, with baseball around, the last thing as a kid I wanted, Evan, was when baseball started, I wanted school to be over because I could listen to games, I could watch games, I could go to games. That was a rite of passage.
Yeah, absolutely. Or how about play the games? I mean, I've got a kid who's playing, little league baseball right now, but we've gotten so much rain here. We still haven't really broken into like full spring weather yet, and we're getting a lot of rain, and we've had a lot of games rained out. So I am ready for the good weather to hit the Northeast here.
Yes, there's nothing like it's like what's the Elvis song, the old Elvis song? It's like a ball game on a rainy day, being sad, that kind of stuff. But that's not what we're doing here. Well, unless you're a Mets fan, but we'll get into it in a minute. By the way, Evan, I got to talk to you about this because I saw this, and this is where my own personal allegiances will come up for the listeners or viewers out there who aren't familiar with my loyalties. I am a lifelong San Diego Padres fan because I grew up out there in San Diego. But I don't know if you saw this, but I had to share this with you and with the baseball listening audience out there. Because one of the great players, I think, and the young players in Major League Baseball today, guy a lot of kids really like, no matter where you're at in the country, I don't care if you're a Yankee fan, if you're a Pirates fan, if you're a Dodger fan, doesn't matter. Elly Cruz of the Cincinnati Reds. Yeah. Shortstop, big, can hit the ball with power, fast, steals bases, everything. But I want to share this with you. I want to get your comments like this. So my guy, right, and this ages me, of course, my guy, Tony Gwynn, San Diego Padres, Hall of Famer, right? Tony Gwynn, I want to share this stat and get your comments, Evan, because you're a baseball guy.
Okay.
Listen to this. By the end of May, Elly Cruz, with 422 career strikeouts, will have passed Tony Gwynn in career strikeouts.
Oh,
are you getting this now?
Yeah.
2.5 years compared to 20 years. 20 years. Elly Cruz already has 62 strikeouts. For 2025, Tony Gwynn averaged 40 per season. Just want to give you appreciation because we, as you know, Evan, I don't know if you heard the podcast we did here with Ben Orlando, who hosts the Midnight Library of Baseball, historical baseball podcast, a great show. But we're into the history thing here too, and Hall of Fame and players, and we're going to talk about another great player coming up in a second. But can you believe that? Here's a guy 3 years into his career. He's going to surpass Tony Gwynn, who played 20.
Yeah, I think that points out a couple of things. Obviously, the greatness of Tony Gwynn as a hitter. I'm looking at where Aaron Judge is currently doing. He's batting over 400, so we're hearing a lot about how he make a run at 400. And the last person to make a legitimate run was Tony Gwynn. I believe it was back in the 93 or 94 season when he did that. So just an incredible hitter. And I think the other thing that it shows us is kind of how the game has changed a little bit, where these players are not afraid to go up there and just take these big swings, trying to get that exit velo. It's all about hitting home runs and whatnot. And it's less about just getting on base and being a good, solid hitter. We just don't see guys like Tony Gwynn anymore. That's for sure.
No, and the stats just are unbelievable, and we'll have to do a show on that one time. I'm still trying to get on the show, by the way, and I'm feeling a little rejected. Trying to get Anthony Gwynn Jr., his son, who's now a broadcaster for the Padres, of course, had his own major league career. Trying to get on to talk about some of that stuff too, and some other things he does. But anyway, so that's just a stat I want to drop, because we start talking about players, we start talking about statistics, and we should appreciate the great ones and going back over time. All right. What we're going to talk now is what we're here to talk about today, which is Juan Soto. Juan Soto, as we've titled the show, Soda. Soto. Now say that fast. It's not the Phil Collins song, Studio. It's Soto. Because the Mets are not getting what they thought. Right, Evan? I think you look at the situation, 15 years, $765 million deal with the Mets. That sets up any player for massive disappointment if he doesn't come in and immediately play like an MVP player. And if you look at Soto so far, he's not even at the Juan Soto level we've seen in past years. Of course, he was with your Yankees last year. He was also a former Padres with the Padres for that year after he got traded over from the Washington Nationals. So we've seen him do great stuff. So we know he's one of the great young players in the game, but the performance hasn't been there. And I think that you look at that and you're not even comparing him to those numbers this year, because they're not terrible. I'm not saying that. They're just not Juan Soto-like numbers. So how much of this, right off the top, Evan, how much of this is less about his performance and just more about expectations to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, you touched on it. He signed that massive contract, and we've seen this happen a lot in many sports. When anytime you have a player who becomes the next highest paid player, there's a lot of pressure on them. They're under a microscope, and I think that's partly what we're seeing with Soto. Although he's a type of guy who, based on what I was able to watch from him last year and spending his year with the Yankees, it seems like the bigger the moment, the more pressure, the better he plays. But I do feel like I do think he's feeling a little bit of the pressure of the big contract, being out from under, the wing of Aaron Judge, and doesn't have that running mate with him this year. And I just think he's pressing a little bit. And now we all know how good he is. I don't think this is going to last a whole lot longer. I mean, he's just too talented not to break out and be the Juan Soto that we all know he is. But you're right. You look at the numbers across the board. I have some notes here, actually. Now, I know we're only like 40 games into the season right now.
Yeah.
But when you look at, for example, his on-base percentage, he finished last year second in Major League Baseball with a 419 on-base percentage. Right now, he's down around 379. Now that's not too bad, but let's take a look over at his OPS, where he finished third last year in Major League Baseball, 989 OPS. He's down around 815. So, and there's a couple other categories where you could point to and say, man, he's really underperforming where he was a year ago. The one area where he still is getting it done, he's walking a lot. His walks are always there. Yep. He's got a great eye at the plate. He's so disciplined. He makes you throw you a great pitch, but it is a bit alarming. I will admit. And I think there's a lot of reasons why this is happening. I talked about the pressure of the monster contract. Let's not lie here. Let's be honest. He's not batting in front of Aaron Judge either. And I know I'm a Yankee fan. Okay. So I don't want to sound like
that lineup that lineup was not as stacked as the Yankees lineup was last year. It's simple. Yeah. And everybody knew that when he went to the Mets, right? Which is one of the questions people had. Why are you leaving this great Yankee lineup to go to the Mets? Now the Mets were making moves too, but to your point, I think that, and you're right. I mean, batting 246 around 250, 8 homers, that kind of stuff. Like, that's not Juan Soto numbers, but why would this is where this is where I think the New York media comes into play, right? Which is, and it's been this way since I was a little kid. I remember the Yankees, the great Yankees Dodgers series, and the Yankees, the writers and what they would do, and the Billy Martins, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But you look at this situation and the people who cover the Yankees, this is great fodder. I'm going to give the fans all these negative pieces. The Yankee fans are eating it up.
Yes.
He sucks. You guys spent all that money and look what you got. Meanwhile, the Yankee fans, not saying you, Evan, meanwhile, the Yankee fans deep down wanted Juan Soto back, of course. Were angry, and then he goes to the Mets, which makes it even worse. Now, if he'd gone to the Red Sox, maybe that would have been equal or probably worse. But nonetheless, so the media, and I say that, here we are as media members, but I say that because they're playing each other in the city of New York. You know how that works. So I look at that, and I agree with you. I don't think he's going to be terrible like this. This is not a guy, Evan, who had one good year and got this massive contract. This is a guy who's consistently shown that he is talented. So how long it takes to get out of this kind of regular player syndrome for him instead of the superstar that he is, I'm not sure about that. But there are things that you notice, and I know you've studied this too, but a lot of guys who play professional baseball, a lot of stuff I watched and read talk about decreased bat speed. So what's causing that? They say it's about 2 miles per hour less than last year. He's off batted ball directions. His sweet spot rate is down, so he's not hitting the ball square up where he usually does. And then it sounds like he's been more passive at the plate.
Yeah.
And to me, that screams to a confidence thing. Now, changing teams, changing coaching staffs, cultures, all that stuff, I think that's all baked in. Hey, he's a human being. Remember that? I don't care how much money he makes. He's a human being, and I think it takes time just to settle in and get used to things.
Yeah. I think it all kind of came to a head for him this weekend or last weekend. When he came back to New York for the first time, and you mentioned the human aspect of this, as much as he want to maybe play it off like it's not going to bother him, when he had those fans throughout Yankee Stadium raining down boos on him, this was a fan base who fell in love with him for 1 year. I know because I was one of the people who fell in love with him. I mean, I'm not kidding you. I mean, my wife loves watching him. My kids love watching him. He really ignited my passion as a Yankee fan last year. And because I grew up on the core four era with Jeter and Posada and Mariano and Bernie Williams and those guys. And when they all left, part of my passion kind of died out. And last year it was back. And I can tell you it was because of Juan Soto. He is, as they say, he's must-see TV. He's so fun to watch. And you mentioned the confidence. He doesn't have the swagger. He's not even doing the Soto shuffle anymore. He just kind of looks like a broken man mentally right now. Physically, we all know he's got it, but mentally he seems not to be there right now. And so,
but then, But Evan, let me ask you though this, because that swagger is one thing, but I know, and again, the controversy you talked about this past weekend when he hits the ball off the wall, which was a single. He thought it was a home run, and he kind of stood there. The accusation of not hustling things out, and Carlos Mendoza, his manager, talked to him about this and said, "Hey, the guy's human." He told him that I think I'm hustling pretty hard, but people watching don't feel that he is. But that's what you get. I mean, and you, Evan, you teach kids too. When you see a kid get down on themselves, and I know he's a grown man and he's making all this money, but still, when you get down on yourselves, you see people from a physical point of view, their body language, all that stuff gets down. It doesn't mean that they're not trying their best. They might just be a little dejected.
Absolutely. Again, I spent all season watching him play last year, and I'm sure you can speak to this as well, being a Padres fan. Of course, he spent time with the Padres. He does not look like the same person out there, and I know there's some of these rumors are maybe being a little bit blown out of proportion with, is he unhappy? Does he wish he was back on the Yankees? I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I do think maybe there's some regret there. I really do. I keep hearing more and more come out about this. I was listening to John Heyman today, actually, talk about this very subject, and how his family was very heavily involved in this decision, and maybe there's some regret there, but certainly he's not carrying himself the same way that we have in the past, and sports, a lot of it is mental. We know that, especially baseball, and he just doesn't seem to have it right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting though because you talk about regret, and sometimes there's regret because, again, I think these things go together, Evan. When you're talking about a baseball player makes a decision to leave the Yankees, which is hard. Like most people are going the other direction. Most people are signing
Yeah,
with the Yankees, right?
yeah,
Or the Dodgers, one of those kind of big teams. And not that the Mets aren't that too, because they technically are because they're a New York team. But you look at this and you say, okay, all the reports saying he's glum, he's not
yeah,
happy. Well, of course, he's not doing what he usually does.
yeah,
It's like starting a new job. You sometimes have those thoughts. Well, did I make the right choice? Am I not playing well because I made the right choice? So you start to question a lot of things. And so for Juan Soto, it's, of course, Yankee fans want it to be true and want him to be absolutely miserable so much so that he stinks forever. But again, I understand that rivalry, fandom, all that stuff. But when it comes to the actual ball player and human being that is Juan Soto, you got to figure that, yeah, that is going, as a human being, that is going through his head. But at some point, like you said, when you have that much God given ability, things will start to click and
yeah.
you'll start to see him be more himself.
Yeah, well, it's up to his teammates too, and I think the coach
Mm.
has to really, get around this guy, and and the team's playing well too, and that's kind of the disappointing part here is that maybe he's not doing what he wants to do on a personal level, which I certainly understand, but the team has had some success, 29-20 right now, second in the division, and the offense really hasn't even gotten going yet. So when things get going for them offensively, I possibly his mood will change, but I do think it's up to the coach, the other leaders in that clubhouse to get around him and try to rally him and get him going, to get him right right mindset.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to step aside for a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about that family influence on the decision for Juan Soto to leave the Yankees and go to the Mets this past offseason. Does that still factor in? Talk a little bit about that dynamic, because Evan and I both have families, extended families. We married into families, the whole thing. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then we're going to get back to, and we'll end the show talking about that intense New York media scrutiny, because if you're a player in New York, Yankees, Jet, it doesn't matter what team you're on in New York, the scrutiny is great. It's the largest media market there is. So it's not going to be a fun day at the office if you're not doing well. So we'll talk a little bit about that. This is Big League Buzz from Sports Not. We're covering MLB. Scott and Evan coming right back after this. In 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to, we're 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the tail end here of Big League Buzz, the MLB podcast from sportsnot.com. If you don't already subscribe, please do us a favor. Subscribe wherever you get your audio. Also, don't forget to rate and review. We appreciate that very much. And you can get the audio wherever you get your podcast. You can find us, whether it's Apple, whether it's iHeart, whether it's Odyssey, doesn't matter. You can find the podcast there. Spotify's a big one now. People really go to Spotify. Also up on YouTube, you can watch us and subscribe there. Hit that like button and the notifications bell so you know when we have new videos. We certainly appreciate that. Scott Gulbransen, Evan Groat, both of Sports Not here to talk to you about the Juan Soto situation in New York. Talk to you about baseball. We certainly appreciate you guys being with us. All right, Evan. So we talked earlier about the family, and you mentioned that when he had a lot of family influence. He said this openly that they played a significant role in his decision to sign with the Mets over the Yankees, particularly their comfort level with Alex and Steve Cohen, the owners of the Mets. And Michael Kay quoted sources saying that Soto's family felt comfortable and said, "You're going to the Mets," right? Now, we don't know the tone, how that was said. But what's really interesting about this, and Evan, we look to family and friends often for advice with big life decisions, right? We ask them about these things. But in reality, it's not always the right way to do things, because people don't always, they might feel they have your best interests in mind, but a lot, and hey, we can all be guilty of this. And in reality, they might be choosing that because it's better for them or because they feel good about it. Like, I might feel better about the Mets than I feel about the Yankees because I've heard you complain about the Yankees, let's say. So I'm going to give you advice to go there, even though maybe it's not the best advice. That piece of this is really interesting because you'll never really know the truth. And I don't want to know the truth of that, because that would mean that he's airing his family's dirty laundry. And I don't think anybody should do that. But this piece of it, I think, is underrated. And one of the things that you can't do, like I said, is dive deep into it unless one of the family members decides to talk openly about it. And I just don't think they will.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because I don't know, as a Yankee fan, when he did decide to go to the Mets, I was contemplating why, like as a Yankee fan, to me, it's like if the money was relatively the same,
Yeah.
why not just stay in your current situation? Things were seemingly going really well. You were in the World Series. He had a career year, and why would you want to go and join the little brother? I guess as I would call it. And no offense to Mets fans, but um, sorry, it's true. All the tradition with the Yankees, the Mets just don't have that. Now, one of the things I went back and listened to some of the comments that Soto made after he signed with the Mets. He said he liked what the Mets had built here in the last couple of years and, what they could build for the future. Again, to me, it didn't make a whole lot of sense because the Yankees have already established themselves as the elite franchise in MLB. So when you hear about how the family influence played a role in this, it does make a lot more sense to me. Now, of course, you want to get advisement from your family, you want to get their feedback, but ultimately the decision should have been his to make and his alone because he's the one that has to go to work every day, put in the time with the teammates in the stadium with all the people involved in the organization. So, we all know there were some perks that were thrown in that benefited his family, like the suites at the stadiums. The Yankees were not willing to give his family a suite. They said we don't provide them. I don't even think Derek Jeter's family got a suite. So
No, they want to
Jeter's
buy
not
one. That's different.
right. You want to pay for it, go ahead and do it. And I personally, I kind of like that policy because
Yeah.
you're not putting anybody on a pedestal. If you do that for Juan Soto, the next time the Mets want to go out and sign a big time free agent, whoever that may be, what are they going to ask for? So
Right.
I kind of set a bad precedent there, in my opinion. But
Well, yeah,
go
and
ahead.
not only that, Evan, but like even in the last 24 hours, we've seen this story about, well, Juan Soto didn't get the private plane he wanted as part of the contract. Like nobody's going to get a private plane from a baseball team. Like you're making enough money where you can go out and get your own plane. Like
Yes.
this stuff, and this is what dovetails into kind of the final part of our conversation here, which is about that intense media scrutiny in New York. Now we know it's there. It's going to be there. It's a big place, a lot of money here, and all that kind of stuff. So I understand it. Like I'm not saying there shouldn't be heavy media scrutiny, and there's going to be more there than let's say he had in San Diego or even in Washington, right? Because Washington, sports-wise, it's a political town. I mean, when it comes to politics, boy, it gets dirty there. When it comes to sports, not as much. So you understand the scrutiny. But what I've seen, and here I am defending Juan Soto, which is not something necessarily I was intending to do, but man, there's some miserable SOBs in the media that are attacking him on everything about his demeanor, and he says this. Well, it's like, dude, if you were at your job at the Washington Post or wherever it is, and you were miserable because you were not doing well, how would you act, right? Because they already act miserable as it is, so I'm going to assume maybe they are miserable in their jobs. But this idea, and it's only gotten worse in the age of social media because now not only are those stories spread faster, now they're expanded upon, and then you get those people living in their mom's basements or wherever they're at that want to be the keyboard tough guy, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And to me, that's where it's hard. I'm not saying that Juan Soto doesn't have a big responsibility. When you make that kind of money, guess what? There's going to be a lot of expectations, and I'm totally fine with that. But I think that the scrutiny to every tiny little thing, look, his shoelaces are untied. What does that say about his attitude, right? I mean, it just goes above and beyond, I think, what the public even needs to know about a player.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think in all sports we see this. I think the media and the fans, they go way too far. I actually found myself feeling a little bit bad for Soto last weekend when he was, at Yankee Stadium and they were all booing him. Now, I'm not one of those real bitter fans. Of course, I would have loved to have Juan Soto back with the Yankees because, again,
Oh, yeah.
I just enjoyed watching him play. I love the way he plays the game. He's exciting to watch. But on the flip side of that, if the Yankees did bring him back, they wouldn't have been able to go out and sign Max Fried and bring in Paul Goldschmidt and trade for Cody Bellinger and do all the things that they have done to, I think, make them a better overall team. But I do agree with you. I think the media goes too far. And the fans do as well. We talked about the human aspect of this earlier. These guys are human. Yes, they're making a ton of money and they can do things that you and I can't do on a field with a baseball bat, but they're still people just like us. And, hopefully people will, now that the first series in New York is done, hopefully, Yankees fans will cool down a little bit.
Yeah. And it's this is a 15-year contract, people.
Oof.
15 years. Now,
Yeah.
again, that's the contract. But even so, you're talking about 2 months. Like, what is wrong with people? I understand being disappointed. I got no problem with that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a Padre fan. Jackson Merrill, who's great, should have been Rookie of the Year last year, in my view, is in the first slump he's ever had. Sophomore slump. He's having it, right? But I'm like, hey, he's a kid. He's going to take some time. Now, Juan Soto has a lot more money and has more established in the major leagues than Jackson Merrill does. But I just don't understand. I think this is just pouring on by Yankee fans who have their own problems, frankly. Right, Evan?
Absolutely.
The Yankees have their own things to worry about in a year where we're seeing the Twins and Tigers just roll over everybody. I mean, some crazy stuff going on in the National League and the American League and the National League. The A's that don't even have a hometown right now. The A's, Sacramento, A's. I mean, some of these teams are performing out of their head, and I think you're going to see these things even out. You and I are fortunate. We talk a lot to some of the best baseball journalists in the country, and we've been hearing consistently from them. Things will even out. Some of these teams might continue to do well and surprise people, but players that are struggling you see it every year. That's the thing with baseball. If you're in the NFL and you go 6 weeks and you're really struggling, that's a lot, right? But in baseball, we were talking about 162 games. And right now, where you're at, it's in 50 games. It's nothing, right? I mean, it's really nothing.
Oh, things can turn around quick in baseball. Absolutely. All it takes is a few hits here and there, build a little confidence, and you're right back to your old self. And again, we talked about the talent with Juan Soto. It's only a matter of time. We know it. You've seen him do it in San Diego. I saw him do it all year last year. And, he may not be hitting in front of Aaron Judge, but he's got a decent lineup there with Lindor and Nemo and Alonso, who's had a very good start to the season as well. So he's just too good not to get it going at some point.
Yes. So here's the question for you in closing, Evan, as we wrap up this edition of Big League Buzz. Does Juan Soto, is he hitting 300 or above by the All-Star break?
That is a great question. I'm going to take the under. I'm going to say no. He might be flirting with 300, but I'm going to say he's under 300, maybe 289, 290 by the All-Star break.
Boy, you took the words out of my mouth. That's exactly, I thought my idea was he will be there. He'll be showing people that by the All-Star break that he's Juan Soto again, right?
Yeah.
Now here we are towards the end of May. We got Memorial Day coming up here. So we're almost into June.
Yep.
You're talking about a month, a little over a month, a month plus between now and you start to get to the All-Star break. Okay. So I think he can turn around. I think he gets on a hot streak. Like you said, he might not go on a bender where it's just like, bam, crazy. But I do think you'll see that. And frankly, that's when they need him to do it. They need him to do it now. But the Mets, if you're a Mets fan, you want to see Juan Soto heating up around the All-Star break, percolating, and then just have him explode in the second half. Particularly the final third of the season is really where you want to hit your streak, right? And be able to do that. So the Mets need to do that. Of course, baseball's an interesting sport. You got to have a whole team playing. You got to have your pitching staff. It's crazy how things can turn around quickly, like you said, both ways. It can go really bad. It can go really good. But I have every ounce of me believes that Juan Soto will be at least 95% of the player you thought he would be. Again, not in the same lineup he was in last year. But he's got to be the guy who lifts that Mets lineup, right, Evan?
Well, I would imagine that's part of the reason we talked about the family pressures and whatnot. But I think another part of this is maybe he wanted to be the guy, and with the Yankees, that was Aaron Judge's team. Maybe Soto has gotten to the point in his career where he says, you know what, it's my turn to be the guy. I want to be the leader. I want to be the alpha in this locker room. And so he went over to the Mets to try to get that done. Now, to this point, as we've said, he hasn't shown that, but we both believe that at some point he'll get there. And you mentioned the 15-year contract. He's got a long time. I mean, this guy's 26 years old. he's going to be just fine. So I expect him to hit his stride here very, very soon.
Absolutely. No, it's going to be interesting. And Evan, I know you also have coming up probably about the same release time as this podcast over on the Sports Not interview. You have a great conversation, a baseball related conversation. We don't just do baseball here on Big League Buzz, which is all baseball, but over on the Sports Not interview. Tell everybody about who you talked to and what you got coming up here the rest of this week.
Yeah, I spoke with Andy McCullough, who's a senior writer for The Athletic. He covers Major League Baseball. He's got a great story out right now where he dives deep into looking at the discrepancy in payrolls in Major League Baseball, that what he calls the have and the have-nots. And are all teams in Major League Baseball actually trying to field a competitive team? And we got into a whole bunch of different topics. We got into whether or not we believe a salary cap is on the way here when the current CBA expires following the 2026 season. And so it was a really great conversation. Andy, I've spoke to him a couple of times before. He's a great baseball mind. And so it was a really great conversation.
That's right. So make sure, in addition to subscribing here to Big League Buzz, make sure you go over and subscribe to the Sports Not interview so you can hear that piece, which is going to be fantastic. I can't wait for that. And the answer is, I think most of them do. Do all of them? Although, I think, hey, I'm in Cincinnati now, and the Reds have a pretty good young lineup and a good manager now with Terry Francona, but the ownership group does not have a good reputation because when they need pieces, they don't seem to go get them because it costs more money.
I don't think Pittsburgh's trying.
Yeah, Pittsburgh, yeah. Although they just took 2 or 3 from Cincinnati, so go figure.
Oh, well, but they got that great talent in Paul Skeens, and they really haven't done much to build around him, at least not in this past offseason. So you're hearing a lot of stuff about Paul Skeens. Will he be traded? Are they going to hold on to him and all that? So that's a story for another day, though.
Yeah, and as a baseball purist, like I call myself a modern purist. I know that sounds weird, but that's because I really do very traditional with baseball in many ways. But in other ways, I understand things have changed and you need to change with the times. Okay. Yeah. I still am against the pitch clock and all that. Yes, it's sped up games, but that's just, to me, bad juju. But nonetheless, you look at the salary cap, and I can't wait to hear the podcast, the Sports Not interview with Evan there, because to me, that is part of the problem. Like every other sport, you have some parity. You have a team that can win 2 games in the NFL and within 2 years be in a Super Bowl. I mean, literally, they can, because you can turn things around quickly thanks to the level playing field with the money. So I can't wait to hear it, man. It's going to be awesome. Evan, man, listen, we appreciate it. I know we're going to have you here on time to time and be part of Big League Buzz. So thanks for being on with us today.
Anytime. Love chatting baseball. You and I are used to talking NFL football together, but it's always nice to talk some Major League Baseball.
Yes, absolutely. I appreciate you being with us, my friend. Again, thank you guys for being with us here at Sports Not. This is Big League Buzz, the MLB podcast. And you can get all your baseball coverage, by the way, up on sportsnot.com. So go visit the website, check us out there. And as I said, you can subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your audio. We'll be back later this week. Yes, I know it's already Thursday. We're going to have another show. We have more interviews coming up. It's going to be Memorial Day weekend, great baseball weekend. So stick around for that. And we certainly appreciate you being with us. For Evan Groat, I'm Scott Gulbransen. This has been Big League Buzz. Take care. Have a great weekend, everybody. And don't forget, keep swinging for the fences. All right. Bingo.